Barakatuh. This is Dr. Halimah again, and today's lecture is number 4, and it is about literary translation. What is literary translation? The main learning objectives of this lecture are as follows. Now, by the end of this lecture, you should really be able to show understanding of the concept of literary translation, and you should be able to translate certain types of literary text. So it is really important to understand what we mean by literary texts, literary translation. Very important to establish this kind of concepts. Because you cannot translate really literary text unless you understand what we mean by literary translation. So today, hopefully, you will be able to show some kind of understanding of this type. Now, what are the types of text? There are certain types of text. There are, you can look at text as literary text or non-literary text. So literary text or literary text really stand as a genre by itself. It's super genre. And the literary texts have certain features. Now you say to me, okay, Dr. Halimah, how can I differentiate or how can I distinguish literary text from non-literary text? I say to you, okay, now you have to look at the following features. You have to look at the following characteristics. When you see a literary text, you can tell whether it is a literary text or not if you know the following, if you are aware of the following features. Number one, a literary text should have a written base form. It should be written. I know there are some spoken form, but the majority of literary texts are written form. Number two, literary texts enjoy canonicity. Canonicity means social prestige, high social prestige. It means people, the society, respect these texts because they reflect their culture, their literature, their heritage. So they respect this form of text. Literature, literary text. And what is special about literary text is that they fulfill an effective and aesthetic rather than transactional or informational function. Means the function of a literary text is like emotional, is effective, is aesthetic, it means to present things beautifully, to move you emotionally, not to pass information, to provoke emotions, not to give you information or instructions like you are reading a machine manual or a scientific text or whatever. No. A literary text main purpose is to evoke and provoke and emotions, make you feel, you react emotionally and sentimentally towards a text. Again, one of the main features of a literary text is that they don't have real world value. They are mainly just as fictional, whether they are fact-based or not. You say to me, no, doctor, this story happened in reality. Okay, it might happen in reality or it might be factual, but again, they don't have this real world value because they are fictional rather than they are fictional, you know, unlike non-fictional material. They are literary texts as well. They are characterized by poetic language use. You can see that in literature, the text has some kind of poetic language. You know, so the form of the language is very important. You need to be aware of this. So another one, another point you need to be aware of is the style. You need to be aware of so many different styles in the in literary text. This is it an archaic style, or is it a contemporary style, or is it an everyday lifestyle, and what, you know? So you need to be aware of all these features. Why? Because they help you identify the type of text in front of you. Okay? Again, it's not only these features. Literary text, conventionally speaking, if you say, what do you mean by literary text? I mean, what are the genres of literary text? The main types of literary text are realized in genres of drama, poetry, fictional prose, such as novels and short stories. So these texts, or these genres, or these types, are really representatives of literary texts. In addition to these types of literary texts, people consider sacred texts as part of this literary literary writing. Now, regarding sacred texts, we will touch on the translation of the Quran, inshallah, and see how they how they approached the translation of the Quran and the translation of the Hadith, inshallah. So I will give a lecture on the translation of the Quran and another lecture on the translation of the Hadith, because they are considered like under the category of literary texts or literature. There are some other types of literary text, but not in the real sense of really literary text, but they have some kind of images that make you feel that, oh, there is some kind of literature about it, like advertising, you know. So it's non-literary, but it has some kind of literary features. So traditionally, translation theories derived largely from literary and sacred text translation. The theory about literary text translation is or has been derived from sacred, the translation of sacred texts. Okay, so you need to be aware of these texts. Now, the most debatable issue on translation is the concept of equivalence in translation. The concept of equivalence is the most problematic issue in translation. Now, let's go to look at translation translating literary text, we will look at it from 3 points, from 3 points of view. Number one, we look at translation as text, we look at translation as process, we look at translation with links to social context. But now looking at translation as text. Now if you want to translate a text from Arabic into English or from English into Arabic, you need to think of 3 main issues. 3 main issues. The concept of equivalence, the concept of communicative purpose, and the concept of style. Now in terms of equivalence, the main debatable question is, you ask yourself, can I find the equivalence of this text in Arabic, the equivalence of this Arabic text in English? How much can I be approximate, near to the exact equivalent of the text? So the question of equivalence is so difficult that translators wonder how they can replicate the complex web of stylistic features found in many literary texts. You say, how can I really transfer, or how can I find equivalent of this style into another style? Again, you need to look at translating the text in terms of communicative purpose. It means the question is how far translators should prioritize loyalty to the source writer versus producing a text that works in receptive genre terms. Now, you need to ask yourself, shall I be loyal to the Arabic source text, or shall I be loyal to the English target text? So it's your decision. But you need to take into account the communicative purpose. It means when you are taking the side of Arabic, then you need to be able to communicate your message, your Arabic message, into English. So the communicative purpose of the text is very important, and you have to be aware of it. Now, another problem, another concern is the translation of style. It is so important when it comes down to translating creative writing. You need to really first look at the writer's cultural space-time. In other words, when you are translating something like a text from مفتاح دار السعادة or ابن قيم الجوزية رضي الله عنه ورحمه الله, you need to signal to the people, to the reader, that your translation reflects the style of Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyah. Can you do that? This is the most difficult bit. Why? Because you need to create the style written in the time of Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyah to the modern reader. And this is a challenge for creative translators, and we'll find out like that later. Now, here is an example. This is just an example to show to you how Halimah 2012 to try to achieve the equivalence in English and the communicative purpose of the hadith that signals that this is a translation of a hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam narrated by Abu Huraira. So what the translator here tried to achieve not only the equivalence in English, not only the communicative purpose, but tried to convey or transfer or translate the style, which is impossible. But Halimah tried his best to achieve these three elements of translating a text. Now look, let's take just the first bit. عن أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه قال خطبنا رسول الله عليه وسلم فقال أيها الناس قد فرض الله عليكم الحج فحجوا. Now, how did he translate the equivalence? What is the equivalence of this part of the hadith in English? Abu Huraira reported, عن أبي هريرة reported that, عن أبي هريرة قال. The equivalence is عن أبي هريرة قال. Abu Huraira reported that. خطبنا رسول الله عليه وسلم فقال. The messenger of Allah, peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, said, while he was delivering a speech to us. خطبنا فقال. خطبنا, the equivalence is while he was delivering a speech to us. أيها الناس. Now أيها الناس, how would you translate it? The communicative purpose, the style. Oh people, Allah has made performing Hajj obligatory on you, so do it. This is the best that he could come up with in terms of equivalence, in terms of communicative purpose, and in terms of style. This is the most appropriate, probably appropriate style for an English reader. Okay, this is just a little example how you should take into account the equivalence issue, the communicative purpose issue, and the style issue of the text. Now we move to translation as process. I'm sure you have passed theory of translation, and you know what we mean by process. The process means the cognitive operations that take place in the mind of the translator before he puts his translation on paper. So when you are translating a creative writing, especially poetry, you need to really brainstorm, think, contemplate. You read the text and you say, okay, I'm not going to translate it today, I'm thinking about it. While you are in the kitchen, while you are at work, while you are driving, not driving, but focus on driving. I don't mean while you are driving you think of my translation, no. What I mean is you reflect, you brainstorm, and then you do the translation. For instance, look at, for instance, the example literary translators like rewriters. You write and rewrite. Like it is a process, you recycle your translation until it gets to a proper form. Now in روضة المحبين ونزهة المشتاقين, Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyah, 8th century of Hijrah, he wrote something and you want to translate what he wrote about, for instance, al-ushq. Now, how are we going to translate a text like this into English? How can we ask the English reader or convey to the English reader the experience of Ibn Qayyim al-Jawzi or people in his time and in his place? Now, how can we achieve equivalence in English? How can we achieve communicative purpose? And again, how can we achieve the style? Look at this. فنقول. This is taken from روضة المحبين ونزهة المشتاقين لابن قيم الجوزية رحمه الله. فنقول اختلف الناس في العشق هل هو اختباري أو اضطراري خارج عن مقدور البشر. فقالت فرقة هو اضطراري وليس اختياري. قالوا وهو بمنزلة محبة الظمآن للماء البارد والجائع للطعام هذا مما لا يملك. It's not easy to translate, not easy at all. You need to really make sure that you find the main equivalence of this text into English, and the communicative purpose. You need to communicate this message to the English reader, and you need to really think of the style of Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyya. Can you write in a style like his? Now look at what we have done, A and B, and you can see the difference. We say people disagree about falling in love. Is it optional or compulsory and beyond of one's control? فنقول اختلف الناس في العشق هل هو اختياري أو اضطراري. We say people disagree about falling in love, comma. Is it optional or compulsory and beyond of one's control? Now look at the second version of it. You can see the difference. We say people seem to have different views of the concept of falling in love. Is it something optional or necessary beyond one's own control? Now, the second one sounds more Englishy, and I'm sure you agree with me. We don't have time really to analyze every word of it, the difference between A and B, from the linguistic point of view, from the equivalence point of view, from the communicative purpose point of view, and even from the stylistic point of view. But I've given you just what we say, a taste of it, so that you appreciate translation when it comes to translation as a process. Now the third point, when you look at translation with links with the social context. So you really need to look at translation as something has something to do with the community. So you need to think, look, translation, if I want to translate, translation has to do with the production team, the communities of interest, the fees, the system. Even you have to look at the the context of literary translation are connected to subject setting. I mean, relationship. You need to think of the ideology, the identity, and the ethics. All these criteria and elements have something to do with the society and translation. So translation has something to do with the social context. You cannot ignore the society around you. So when you are translating, make sure that it is compatible with the social context you are living in, the setting. Is it clear? I hope so. I hope so. Okay. Now, an example. Now this This is an excerpt taken from a little story written by Nuaimi as well. The story is a short story and cut and chat. Now, I would like you to look at this excerpt and relate it to the social context. Listen. كان جو غرفة الضيوف باردا ومنعشا يهدهد جفونه ويغريه بقيلولة ممتعة، لكن الملل لبس لبوس القرف ولف شباكه حول روحه القلقة المتيقظة. فكر في قص شعره الذي طال في بعض الأماكن من رأسه وهر من أماكن أخرى. سرح شعره بأصابع يده اليمنى القصيرة، وتذكر كم كانت زوجته تكرر على مسامعه في مناسبات عدة أن شعره بدا وكأنه سلة قش ليلة عرسه. Now, how are we going to translate this? You need to think of the social context. You need to think, look, this story was written by an Arab native speaker. He lives in certain context. He lives in a certain setting. The environmental atmosphere, the cultural atmosphere, the social atmosphere, the whole environment of the text. You need to bear in mind when you are doing this. Okay, and I left the translation for you to analyze and investigate. Now, I would like, before I leave, to stress on the importance of translating the practical. Now, this practical is taken from, translate the following speech by Shylock, taken from Merchant of Venice by Shakespeare into Arabic. I would like you to translate it into Arabic, please. And be creative, be imaginative, and be good in transferring style. This is Shakespeare's style. I know it is difficult, but I'm sure you are up to it. You are level 7, which is good, very good. Now, how are we going? And then translate the following excerpt from a short story into English. Use your creative ability in your translation. Again, I'd like you to translate it in your own words. So please do as much, do practice, and I would like to thank you very much indeed for your listening to me and watching this lecture, and I hope that you will benefit from it and enable you to translate in creatively and in a very effective way. Thank you very much, and see you next and talking to you next lecture. Thank you.